Oh, this is funny as hell. This is White Lightning 777 who's going to do a video on realism with Russia, Putin. But, there's an interesting trend of the people who think that Putin is somehow a hero, who think that somehow they're a theocrat, an ex-Stalinist theocrat, who is brainwashed by the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, which, by the way, their leadership is infested almost entirely with ex-KGB agents who found God. But despite finding God, their behavior is the same. It's amazing. These people who do that are also the ones who are the most ignorant about not only how Russia works, they don't even know how their own government works. They're like, oh, we think you're an armed guard. We don't like your job. They even complain personally. They think that the federal contract guards go into people's houses and, I don't know, kick down doors. They don't even know the difference between law enforcement and security. What is security is defensive. You're at one or more sites. I can't even get into that. For clearances. Some of them are open to the public. Some of them are SSI. Some of them are classified. Some of them are special access only. Most of these sites, what are they? They're databases, right? They don't even realize when you defend a site, that site is kind of like your fortress, and your job is to keep terrorists from invading the site, or to deal with, or if somebody on there goes berserk and insane, to deal with that situation. It's defensive. You don't arrest people. Sure, you write incident reports. Sure, you de-escalate. Sure, you try to restrain, protect, and restrain them. But all that goes away. You kill them. And sure, you write an incident report. You can certainly talk to law enforcement. Then you hand them over to law enforcement or the EMTs once the situation. You certainly put in your incident report, hey, what I saw here was an egregious felony, that this should be a high priority for prosecution. You detain somebody. They certainly, as a witness, will take your input, and it's taken very seriously. But security doesn't prosecute or persecute people. Those jobs, ethically or otherwise, done by someone else. And okay, you don't like people kicking doors in. Well, why are you kicking doors in? Are you kicking doors in to deport illegals from the country? Or are you harassing people over their beliefs? Both. Depends on why. There's nuanced problems to this. Now, in some of your terrorists or lunatics object to the way that federal programs are run. Things are unconstitutional, they're corrupt, they're paying money, they're a waste of my time, etc., etc., etc. These complaints are somewhat valid. You know who the people who complain most about the federal government are? The people that are most government? Federal employees. Federal employees bitch and complain, in some cases with justification, more about the system than the entire rest of society combined. Unfortunately, nobody listens to them. If you don't listen to the people that have boots on the ground that see it from the inside, well, a lot of your problems stay there. But look, let's say you fix all the federal programs. You fix the VA, you fix the Treasury, you fix DHS or Health and Human Services, the CDC, you fix all that. Well, or you privatize it. Well, those areas still have sites. They still have databases. They still have buildings. They still have employees. Okay, maybe they work for a company, but either way, fixed or not, there is a need for security. Sure, there's more than one database. There's more than one building. But if you start knocking off these buildings and institutions, your checks are going to be delayed. Your FDIC and your bank's not going to work. Your 401ks aren't going to work. And a lot of your credit cards and private stuff that you think is business related or whatever, guess what? That interfaces with the federal government too. If Your stock market, all that stuff, Wall Street, all that stuff is a hybrid system. It runs on public and private systems. You knock out the federal systems, all your stocks go away, your Social Security checks go away, your welfare checks go away, your VA checks go away. So every diabetic in the country that needs insulin doesn't get it. Every single homeless lunatic that's on psych meds don't get it. The money doesn't work. It literally doesn't work. The entire ATM and credit card system falls apart. You knock out a few of these systems, it's mayhem. This is worse than nuking a city, worse than 9/11. One of the things that I do for a living is to protect one or more of these central areas. Okay? Literally, what contract guards protect is every single thing in your life that you take seriously. And, okay, people don't like the federal government. Maybe it should be delegated to the states or private companies. Guess what? The infrastructure is still the same infrastructure. It's still vulnerable to the same type of attack and sabotage that it was before you fixed it. No matter how you do fix society or change society, or if you're a left or increase government, or if you're a libertarian, decrease that and privatize it, the need is the same. What I do is essential is to defend one or more of these sites from people who would literally want to destroy the entire civilized world, starting with the United States. Yeah. There are people who would love it if every schizophrenic in the country didn't get their meds, or your grandma didn't get her check, or, your FDIC, your bank accounts didn't work, your ATM credit cards didn't work. I love it. Or even, the airports and aircraft, it's with DHS and TSA. You knock that out, guess what? The planes don't fly. And if you're in the air, you may not get to land. You think planes didn't run out of gas on 9/11? That everybody got down to an airport? Most did. But plenty of them came into the runway running out of fuel. Engines off, barely getting down. It's common knowledge. Databases prevent that. And the people who bother, we'll get back to Russia and Putin, are the ones that are profoundly ignorant, don't even understand how basic society works currently, or even if you fix it. And what about Putin? Let's be realistic. People think he's a nationalist hero. And Putin, remembers KGB agent. They know how to manipulate public opinion. They know how the techniques of mind control and brainwashing, of seducing people, of getting people to spy are very sophisticated. Some of the most advanced psychosocial techniques for manipulation on the face of the earth were developed by the KGB and the Soviet system. And if you think Nazi propaganda was bad, those guys were babes in the wood compared to the communists. Communists are the worst. Now you get Putin, a product of an ex-Stalinist system, who all of a sudden claims to have founded God. Brainwashed by the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, which, by the way, the Kirill, we have no idea whether he was a KGB agent himself, filled with these ex-KGB agents that have gone off the rocker, holy rollers who want to restore something a Russian world. Sound familiar? Think that they're going to convert everybody back to orthodoxy. Well, okay. Yes, globalism is bad. Sure, Soros is bad. Okay. But there's other bad things in the world. Theocracies suck too. Theocracies are bad, especially when they're run by people who basically had a sociopathic job for decades prior to their conversions. Just because you change your ideas doesn't necessarily translate into changing your behavior. So Putin invades Ukraine on bullshit charges. Claims that the place is run by Nazis and drug addicts. Of course, the fact that in Europe, most of your neo-Nazi groups and stuff go to Russia to have their meetings and their concerts because there's no regulation of it, or you could just bribe the cops. Yeah, he has mentioned that. In Germany, you can't have Holocaust denial or white power concerts. It's illegal. You know where they go? Russia. And then they claim, oh, Zelensky's corrupt. Well, the guy's an entertainer and a movie star and a comedian. Yeah, he's going to have money. He got it in the entertainment industry like rock stars or Snoop Dogg or Metallica has money. Doesn't, and so sure, the oligarchs and some of the paid, some of the people like his stuff. Okay, well, that's Europe. Doesn't mean he's a crook or whatever. He ran on an anti-corruption, drain the swamp program. I mean, if you look at the criticisms that he's directed at Ukraine, and you go look at Donald Trump drain the swamp, I mean, there's like 95% equivalency and similarity to both. Of course, he won with 73% of the vote because basically his opponents weren't able to rig an election. Russia, Ukraine's filled with drug addicts. This is from Crocodile Putin. The worst street drug in the world is crocodile. It's only present in Russia because even the addicts and the dealers in other countries won't sell it. Worst drug problem in the world. Probably the largest collection of neo-Nazis in the world. More organizations in the world. More white power concerts in the world. By the way, did you know that there are more copies of the Turner Diaries printed in Russian than in English? Same with Arabic and Farsi. Did you know that? Research it. A little bit tricky to find the data, but it's there. It's not classified. It's just a little hard to find. And they think, oh, yeah, I'm going to break legs and I like Putin, really? You don't even know how, your own bank works, or how your credit cards work, or how your welfare or social security works, or disability works, or VA works, or CDC works. You don't even know how any of that shit works in your own country. And these dipshits that don't even understand how shit works in their own country seem to think they can understand the foreign policy implications elsewhere. And what are Putin's objections? Well, he thinks Ukraine's run by neo-Nazis, despite the fact Zelensky's a Jew. Well, I don't know, neo-Nazis are recruiting Jews now? Some things just really shouldn't change. It's all, and they're complaining, oh, the Ukraine, they want the official language of Ukrainian, and Putin's saving his people. Russia has an official language. It's Russia. If you speak Ukrainian or English or whatever in Russia and you sign that, you will go to jail. The penalties for that in Russia are far worse than Ukraine. And yeah, you'd have some fines, and you might be forced to learn Russian, or told, listen, you're not going to get your job until you speak Ukrainian, or you can't, you have to spell your name a certain way. Yeah, it's an official language. Good. We should do that in America. You like pushing 2 for Spanish, and 3 for Japanese, and 4 for Chinese, and 5 for Swahili. And when you go on a phone or a machine, how many languages do you have to speak if you're a 16-year-old kid flipping burgers? I think it's best that you only have to speak 1 language. 2 is bad, 3 is worse, 4 is a disaster, 5 is worse. Get the point? Ukraine sensibly, then you speak a language. And who says a country can't form alliances with other countries and sign treaties and enter into trade agreements with other countries? Everybody knows that that's a basic freedom. Russia has no business telling somebody they can join NATO or not. And here's the other thing. See, Ukraine is just a test case. The real problem in the world, and the worst problem, isn't Putin or even the Soros. It's the Chinese Communist Party, which, by the way, runs all the shit. Okay, they're the root cause. And the Chinese Communist Party wants peace. Taiwan thinks they're a renegade state. Well, what are the implications of Taiwan? Again, I have no understanding of foreign policy. They've never taken any poli-sci, they've never taken any history, they've never taken any sociology, know nothing about biology, nothing about the immune system, nothing about that. These idiots that whine, these are dipshits that have flunked out of high school that know nothing, or believe every single lunatic on the internet that knows nothing but uses big words. They know nothing. They don't understand basic things. They think that, for example, that you have a drug that's a sterilant that can mass sterilize humans. Well, people have searched for that weapon for years. It doesn't exist. Or they think that you have a drug or a vaccine or whatever that can cause zero symptoms whatsoever. None. And all of a sudden, a year or two later, bang, you're dead. If you get it, if you're injected once, no, Beavis. Things like cigarettes that cause cancer, these things that cause long-term harm are things that have been used for long-term, for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. Basic biology. It's not hard to see why, because the damage you inflict on the body to get cancer to sterilize somebody has to be cumulative. If one little cell in your body fails, that's not going to bring down the whole system. It has to be something that has inflicted widespread damage for a long, long period of time. Not one shot. If you're bitten by a cobra, let's say, and you survive, you're not going to drop dead 2 or 3 or 4 years later all of a sudden. Get through the first 72 hours or, let's say the first 2 weeks or a month, you're good to go. That's the way it is. So they don't like Ukraine speaking language. They object to Ukraine having a military. They say we're afraid Ukraine will get nukes again. Well, Ukraine is already nuclear power. They gave them up for a security guarantee that, by the way, the United States hasn't lived up to and Russia has violated. After this war is over, they're entitled, morally and legally, somebody has to give those nukes back to them, by the way. Oh, well. And you think Putin's going to save the world? You think this idiot, this Stalinist idiot that was part of a system that conquered a third of the territory and that killed twice the number of people as Hitler is going to save the world just because he's a religious fanatic and waves a cross around and wraps himself in a flag? Good God, you're a dumbass. We have to be realistic about, we'll use the C word, culture. Certain institutions, certain countries are just not yet set to be first world countries. You get theocracies like Russia or Iran with their mullahs running it, or Afghanistan, or Bahrain or whatever. These countries are not really good candidates to join the first world. Now, they may surprise us. They may kick these guys out and reform. You hope they do. But they're really not. These are autocratic regimes. Sure, they're xenophobic. Sure, they don't want to be part of anything. Yeah, because they're the reason why why are they xenophobic? They don't want to join NATO or the alliances. Why? Because they're even more degenerate than the people they don't want to join. Putin doesn't like NATO and doesn't like the world community international. Why? Whatever the problems are in the Western world, he's even more degenerate than the Western world, not less. Does that ever occur to you, dipshits? Yeah. Nope. You think this guy, you think somehow a country that's in 11 time zones somehow is justified in conquering other countries, especially with their egregious human rights violations? And the Soviet Union, by the way, funded the Chinese Communist Party, which, by the way, killed more people than both Hitler and Stalin combined, which, by the way, funded the rise of a guy called Mao Zedong that didn't kill 6 million people like Hitler did. Well, okay, we'll deny that, but whatever. We'll assume that's true. Killed 60 million people. 10 times the Holocaust. And nobody disputes the fact that this one leader in China has done this. And up to this day, the casualty rate's well over 100 million. And the Soviet Union and the system that Putin was in started that. That's the point of origin for that. You think this idiot's going to save the world? That somehow they're more moral than a new country that broke away. Yeah, Ukraine broke away from the Soviet Union. Yeah, they're corrupt. There are problems, with disorder, corruption. Do you think that 5 or 10 years after 1776 and the United States got away from Britain, think we weren't corrupt? There was slavery, dueling was legal, widespread moonshining, widespread gambling. I mean, the only good Indian was a dead Indian. People were discriminated against. It wasn't just blacks; it was whites. If you didn't, kowtow to the Klan or groups before that or whatever. I mean, pretty much were. New countries have problems like this. They either continue to wallow in their filth, or they elect people like Zelensky that want to drain the swamp and form alliances with more experienced, more seasoned countries, and they enter into the upward track of becoming civilized. Now, here's the problem with Putin, and also with China vis-a-vis Taiwan. These dictatorships seem to think that they have the right to determine who does and who does not join the civilized world. Bullshit. Every country that joins the civilized world is one less country that we have to kill in World War III or in some other catastrophe. Every ally that you make is someone that will A, help you kill your enemies, and B, you don't have to kill yourself. It's a good thing to have functional relationships with other countries. Even Donald Trump, ironically enough, said it's a good thing with Russia. Well, we don't want to have World War III. We want to try to, sometimes you try to deal with the idiots like North Korea and Russia and try to mitigate the harm they could do or try to talk them down from their lunacy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But due to the fact that we have a mask hole in the White House that stole an election and has advanced to moderate dementia, of course, Putin's going to take advantage of that in Ukraine. Of course, the mask holes jacked up the price of oil. Putin saved up a war chest to buck the sanctions, conquer another country. This is predictable. The eco-terrorists knew that are responsible for this. But who else is responsible for this? Who else is responsible are people who have these entirely unrealistic ideas about Russia, about theocracy, who think that some ex-Stalinist turned religious fanatic in a church that is infested up and down with ex-KGB agents is somehow going to save the world in a productive way, or somehow is even a good place to live, or somehow is even better than the United States. Really? Give me a break. You're fucking crazy. You're a fucking lunatic. And by the way, before you even side with people like Putin, well, the first step is to learn how your own society works and why your own society is the way it is. A lot of the problems with the federal government with the databases arose from the Great Depression, when basically capitalism essentially broke down, or they were seduced by these totalitarians and communists advocating for a different way of life that at the time, 1917, wasn't necessarily, or the Great Depression, wasn't necessarily so obvious that capitalism was the best system. Of course, now we know it is. But they don't understand what went wrong and how to fix it. And even if you fix it, there are still going to be people like me who guard these sites, whether they're privatized, whether they're fixed, whether they're reformed, or they get worse. And most of the sites that they're dedicated to are pretty innocuous. It's, well, what roads need to be fixed, or, how much money is printed, or, tracking the progress of diseases in the population. I mean, are some groups in CDC more prone to breast cancer than others? I mean, there are these things that are sort of, maybe wasteful, but that harmless and, some benefits, some side effects, whether it's a bad thing with a few good effects or something good with a few bad side effects. Well, you look at each of these programs, pretty debatable. But most of them aren't really controversial. There's the 10% of baddies that are, like the gun list and some of the no-fly lists and things that are abuses, but I'm not involved in any of that. When you work for an institution, you have to research what that institution is doing and whether what they're doing benefits society. I mean, if you do what I do for security, you want to look at who you're working for and really investigate practically every open source site and then go on WikiLeaks and see what else they're up to before you join such a site. Obviously, most people who do what I do screen the sites before they work for them. Duh. And they're not involved with going after political dissidents and kicking people's doors down the middle of the night. Security doesn't do that. That's something that special forces, that's something that's more of the FBI and the ATF. I mean, people who did Waco, no, armed security didn't go after that. And the feds went after that. FBI and ATF went after that, maybe involving a few Delta Force people. And the guys don't even realize if you have people that are whining about who's oppressing who in society, and they don't even know the difference between security and law enforcement, and they can't even identify institutions that are responsible for things. I mean, these idiots, if you don't even know how your own government works, how the hell are you going to talk about Russia and a war or a vaccine or any other item of importance? How are you going to even look at how these things work if you don't even understand science? I mean, you think that and these dipshits think that a computer chip could be injected for a needle in something that costs $20? Do you ever take an IT course? Do you ever take apart a computer? Do you know how big a computer chip is? No, Beavis. And, people want to engage in, by the way, if you want an experimental therapy, as long as it's voluntary and you're informed, sure, why not? The weed laws are dumb, but that's another story. But let's be realistic about what Russia is doing and the sheer incompetence of the military. That ship, the Makarov, that ship they just lost. They almost just had another ship get bombed. So they've had the Moscow get bombed, and then they had one of their submarines get bombed, and then they had this Makarov ship get bombed. I mean, these guys can't even protect their... I mean, it's literally a case of, you sank my battleship, or try to twice. You know that the vehicles that invaded Ukraine, again, you can research this, many of them had Chinese tires that were imported that didn't even have the weight rating for the vehicle. So like if you have an 8-wheel drive vehicle that weighs 100,000 pounds and it has 10 tires, each tire has, let's say a 10-wheel, each tire has to be rated for 10,000 pounds, and they're only rated for 3,000 because they buy cheap shit from China and they fall apart. Or they can't even supply fuel. Or these pilots flying these Su-35 planes, these high-tech planes, they can't even fly in a formation of more than one or two planes. They don't even know how to use their own smart bombs. They fly like 200 feet off the ground and drop a bomb that they don't even know how to activate. And of course, they get shot down with Stinger missiles left and right. These dipshits, I mean, they fly a helicopter. There are cases, I mean, here's how stupid the fucking Russians are. There's a anti-tank weapon, I think it's called, what the hell? It's not a Stuka, it's, what the hell is that shit called? It's a Ukrainian system that uses a fly-by-wire and a laser. It's an anti-tank system. It's made to kill tanks. Well, there are cases of these Russian helicopters flying so low that they can be shot with a ground-to-ground thing. If you're flying like 20 feet off the ground, you can shoot a helicopter with an anti-tank weapon. And they do this again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And you think Putin's going to save the world? He can't even fight a war. The people thought, oh, Russia's the second most powerful army in the world. Why the United States? Nope. Turns out they're the second most powerful army in Ukraine. I mean, you have to be realistic. I mean, some societies, I mean, there are some places in the world, you know, the jungles of South America that are Stone Age tribes that literally are headhunters and cannibals. I mean, you're not going to form a Jefferson democracy with those kind of people. And these autocratic ones, these theocratic societies, or highly fascist countries or communist countries, you know, they're still believe in that shit. And if you do you think it's desirable for Vladimir Putin to conquer every non-NATO country in Europe and thereby instigate other countries like Iran and North Korea and China to engage in the same behavior, except towards people that we are allies with? And by the way, China knocks out Taiwan, Great Depression. Almost as bad as knocking out the federal infrastructure that I talked about, because we're enmeshed with all that. Our high-tech computers, everything's kind of mixed together with that. And decoupling from, I mean, that's going to take years. See, the reason you kick the Russians out of Ukraine is to kick them out of all non-NATO countries, one, and two, to keep China from invading Taiwan, which, by the way, would destroy our economy within days. That's the point of the Ukraine thing. And regardless of which political party you're in, I mean, this is so obvious that even dumbasses like Pelosi can see it. Even, you know, Donald Trump said he'd give more shit to Ukraine, not less. And he even anticipated the problem. He had given them javelins and Stinger missiles and was building up their army. He kind of knew that the Russians were going to try something and set them up to survive. And by the way, yes, that's Donald Trump, not the maskhole Biden. Okay. Should we have boots in Ukraine? Hopefully not, unless Russia throws a nuke or a chemical weapon. At that point, it's on. It's like you're done. Because you think that fallout's going to stay in Ukraine? You think if he uses a WMD, do you think the wind doesn't blow over Europe? Really? Look what happened with Chernobyl. They lied about that shit. And that's just due to incompetence. But, you know, you can't let Putin get away with this dumb shit or determine who joins the civilized world and who doesn't. I mean, with that kind of attitude, I mean, people like that need to be smacked down to size. And what's the more fundamental question even than defending Taiwan? Like, what is a good foreign policy for the United States as the leader of the free world, as the most powerful and the most civilized nation on earth? Well, it boils down to two things. One, a buck in the pocket, and two, a kick in the ass. That's the part of the price of freedom. It's the way it is. And until the rest of the world freely and voluntarily understands the superiority of our system and understands meritocracy and understands capitalism and understands human rights and personal freedom and rises to the level of the United States, we're going to have to keep doing it. Now, some places in the world have made pretty good progress in that. Some of them are pretty good. Most of them, that's the point. Have to be realistic about the Russians. I don't care if their women have blonde hair and blue eyes. And the Russians that understand the importance of civilization, you know what they do? They leave Russia. They go to the civilized world. They learn English. So you don't have to be afraid of Russian people that live in the country. They agreed with Putin, they'd be in Russia. Reason why they live here is because they understand the superiority of our system. See, individuals can become civilized faster than their societies do. And you have to have a critical mass of enough individuals that are civilized, and they have to get in the level of get the levers of power before they can civilize their society. That's the point. The idiots who think you know what's going on in Ukraine, you think Putin's a hero. Stupid. Stupid as the day is long. Anyway, this is White Lightning 777. I got to go to work. Long live the Republic, and Slava Ukrainia.
This is White Lightning 777. Should do a video. I guess part 2 of Russia. We have to be realistic about that. I just listened to Vladimir Putin's, bullshit Victory Day speech on the day he beat the Nazis. Really? You know what I've come to realize? Vladimir Putin's a Democrat. He's a Democrat. What do Democrats do? They don't like somebody. They invent bogus conspiracy theories such as the Russia hoax, ironically enough. They besmirch their political opponents as, quote, Nazis and extremists. They take efforts to, extreme efforts to prevent their opponents from buying weapons with which to protect themselves after they're sensibly being threatened by Democrats. And then they, project basic authoritarianism. Now in Russia, the authoritarian is a little bit, more direct than what we see in the States. And they conflate struggles of the past with struggles now. And Putin, like Democrats, confesses his own sins by accusing other people of committing the crimes that he himself has committed. And here's the interesting thing about their hypocrisy. Go look up the citizenship criteria to become a Russian citizen. One of those things you have to do is to speak Russian. It's the same policy if you are going to be a Ukrainian citizen. Generally it's suggested to speak Ukrainian, although Zelensky's making an exception. If you come and you fight in the army and they win the war, then, he'll give citizenship to the foreign soldiers. The presumption is that if you, put your rear end on the line for Ukraine, that, if you're willing to take up a gun and defend Ukraine, you're probably willing to learn Ukrainian. Not an easy language. By the way, there's more cases and numbers. There's more declensions and conjugations in Ukrainian than there is in Russian, by the way. It's not an easy language. But, that's what Putin does. Putin's a Democrat. The way it is. Get over it. It's what he does. And we have to realize that what's the difference between whining about, a country has the right to buy weapons if they want, to form alliances with who they want to. They have the right to disagree with you. They have the right to go their own way. So what if Kiev wants to buy nukes or advanced weapons? None of Putin's goddamn business. This is somebody who just launched a new kind of nuclear missile that can carry, 2 or 3 times the payload, named Satan, and he's whining about Ukraine buying a few Western javelins. This has to stop. We can't have a functional world where one rule applies to Vladimir Putin, but not to everybody else. Putin needs to understand one thing. The privileges that he reserves to himself, the legitimate ones, to himself and to his country, are also allowed to every other country. And if he doesn't understand that, well, sucks to be you. And I would make a suggestion to the people of Russia or the generals. When you overthrow Putin, or you end up treating him like Ceausescu or Mussolini, a fate which he richly deserves, don't hang him or shoot him. We've tried this at Nuremberg. We've hung people. Ceausescu was shot. Mussolini, I think, was hung. It doesn't work. These dictators keep coming up and keep pulling the same stunts. Now, I'm kind of in favor of traditional values. When you catch somebody that has murdered thousands and thousands of people, or even or millions with a bioweapon that attack the world, or some, I guess, let's just call it megadeath, like massive murder at a genocidal level, you know, I would suggest to the Russian people or government, when you catch Putin, burn him at the stake. Send a message to these other dictators and to these other types of individuals that putting bullshit charges on other countries and killing tens of thousands of their own people will not, under any circumstances, be tolerated. The borders of a country are sacred. Everybody stay in your lane. This is White Lightning 777 signing out.